It's impossible to listen to the rich, baroque, often clanging and thudding music of Florence and the Machine and not feel a little stirring in your heart. With theatrical flourishes like accelerating climaxes and rousing crescendos, which are standard Florence fare, and melancholic lyrics, the band's leader, Florence Welch, creates a heady, auditory experience that more closely mirrors a gospel choir's frenzy or a dramatic film score than radio-friendly pop. Her music is augmented by moody visuals, allowing fans into the introverted singer-songwriter's colorful and magical inner world. There are certain themes that Florence routinely returns to in her music, videos, stage performances, and costumes, which point to some of her most enduring inspirations: religion, fine art, and mental illness. This video will look at each of these themes, attempt to trace their origins among Florence's many eclectic influences, and dig a bit deeper to decipher more of what her music wants us to understand.
Between crucifix and the Hollywood sign, we decided to get heard. Now there's a few things we have to burn. Set our hearts ablaze, and every city was a gift, and every skyline was like a kiss upon the lips, and I was making you a wish. In every skyline, how big, how blue, how beautiful. How big, how blue, how beautiful.
Religion, Christ haunted. Though Florence has said that she isn't particularly religious, the pageantry and drama of religion, especially Catholicism, routinely make appearances in the band's lyrics and videos. As America Magazine's Mary Grace Mangiano wrote, the sacramental imagination of Catholicism has a deep hold on her psyche. As Flannery O'Connor said of the American South, Welch seems, if not Christ-centered, then certainly Christ-haunted. And haunted, this young woman certainly is. Demons, ghouls, and ghosts make frequent appearances in the band's lyrics, standing in for Florence's many afflictions, emotional damage, and regrets. Just take the, haunting introduction to 2011's Shake It Out.
Regrets collect like old friends, here to relive your darkest moments. I can see no way, I can see no way. And all of the ghouls come out to play, and every demon wants his pound of flesh. But I like to keep some things to myself.
In Florence's world, things are very clearly good or evil, black or white, either savior or demon. And taking a peek into her background, this starts to make more sense. Florence was raised Catholic and attended Catholic schools. If not a source of salvation, Christianity, particularly the Old Testament allegorical man and his eternal struggle against evil variety of Christianity, certainly serves as a source of inspiration for Florence, who once told USA Today, "The first songs I remember liking were hymns. I find it's nice to mix the mundane and the magical, the irrelevant with the huge themes: sex, love, death, marriage, guilt," which is a great way to describe Florence's use of religion in her work. She goes straight for the heavy stuff, the big G God. Just see song titles like Girls Against God, Dream Girl Evil, Prayer Factory, and Heaven is Here. And that's just from the latest album. What most interests me about Florence and her relationship to religion as a source of inspiration is how much it differs from many of her peers, fellow millennials and her fellow album makers alike, who seem to strive to remove all specificity when discussing anything bordering on religion. She's not talking about spirit or energy or vibes. She's talking about standing off against the devil, ascending to heaven, and praying to a certain cisgendered and out of vogue God. Juxtaposed against these dark age moral tales are her personal views, which are much less precise. She frequently talks about channeling something when she creates music and performs.
Whatever kind of channel there is or whatever's like going on when you're making music, which often feels like something is working through you rather than you, it was so much clearer, and this album just kind of flowed out. I've had to really give myself over to like whatever is in charge of performances for me. Like, it isn't really me out there. Like, I had to just be like, okay, you got this.
Florence even wrote a book called Useless Magic that is inspired by the otherworldly force she feels is present in her creativity. But these ideas don't seem to be rooted in any particular religion or organized practice of spirituality. But still, Florence's own undefined spirituality and the spirituality of others serves as a constant and consistent pool of inspiration. When speaking about the dance track that changed her life, Florence described the Sources disco remixed gospel song, You Got the Love, which she also remade on Florence and the Machine's debut album.
But really it's the spirituality of that song, and I think the spirituality that's at the core of a lot of dance music, because dance is about catharsis and transcendence. You can feel her sort of connection to spirit there, and she sings with such reverence. I mean, her performance of that and that song itself changed my life.
This sentiment really seems to be at the core of Florence's use of religion and religious themes in her art. She's emphasizing the idea that change and redemption are possible, no matter what metaphorical demons you may be fighting. Fine art, the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. Almost immediately after the band's debut album, fans and critics started to notice that the lithe, willowy, bottle ginger frontwoman of Florence and the Machine seemed to have stepped out of another time, with her shaggy flowing locks, often styled in milkmaid braids, her waves set off by long bangs, and her Baroque vintage dresses. Fashion houses took notice too, and Florence began a long-standing partnership with Gucci's creative director Alessandro Michele, whose lush, often nostalgic designs for the Italian brand seemed made for a muse like Florence. This sense that Florence is a strange relic from another time is really fitting given her background. Her mother was a professor of Renaissance studies at King's College London for much of her career, an association that no doubt inspired the singer's very name, as Florence, Italy was an important cultural center during the Renaissance. Florence was also briefly an art student, studying illustration at Camberwell College of Arts before leaving to pursue music. Through her mother, or through art school, but probably through her mother, Florence became aware of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, a loose band of early Renaissance English artists and art critics who promoted a return to classical painting styles that emphasized history and nature through lifelike details and color. Believing that artists like Raphael and Michelangelo were crass and pagan, these young painters looked to their Christian faith for inspiration, and some of the most famous paintings from this group are read as allegories for Christian morals. Like Florence, they were nostalgic artists who rejected modernity and minimalism for a fancier retro style.
Pre-Raphaelite art is just something I'm never getting away from. I think it's because I've got an old-timey face, and I don't really suit modern clothes. I don't know what it is. I think I look like a haunted, painting most of the time.
Oh, there's that word haunted again. Florence does seem to resemble Elizabeth Siddal, an art student and a frequent model for the Pre-Raphaelites. The Tate Museum described Elizabeth as being boyish and not beautiful by Victorian standards. Her long red hair and unique appearance caught the attention of the Pre-Raphaelites, and she was featured in some of their most iconic works, including Ophelia by John Everett Millais. Fans and journalists have found easy connections between these artists and Florence's styling, and there's even an Insta page dedicated to the similarities between Florence and their work, and almost exclusively featuring Elizabeth Siddal. Florence has also spoken about other artists and how they've directly inspired her work, particularly her album covers, which were all photographed by Tom Beard.
We would become fixated on certain groups of artists and explore them. It was like our own art college. We were both art college dropouts, but we found a way to still learn about artists and explore them through making record covers. The first album was the Pre-Raphaelites, the second we got very into Urte and Klimt and Tamara de Lempicka. Fourth one, we were looking at James Turrell.
Although she makes popular music, Florence is constantly asking her fans to dig deeper and immerse themselves in her inner world, which has been heavily shaped by literature, music, religion, and art from bygone eras. She told Viva magazine that some of her first loves were Victorian ghosts, superheroes, and mermaids. She said, "I was sensitive and shy and felt uncomfortable in myself when I was a kid. So I almost wonder if in this thing that I've created, I've kind of become my childhood imagination of myself." With a massive global audience, Florence also seems to see herself as a conduit who brings aspects of less accessible art forms like fine arts and books to the masses, people who may not have the time, the money, the education, or close proximity to cultural centers like London, and therefore can't or don't experience art. Mental illness, faith, and redemption. Hunger, sadness, and regret are persistent themes in Florence and the Machine's lyrics, and the general tenor of their music is often remorseful underneath all that jubilant clanging and sonic roughhousing. Florence styles herself as a tortured artist who fights with the same demons that have doomed many young women before her: anxiety, disordered eating, drugs, and alcohol. Through her sweet serenades of self-destruction and energetic odes to discovering the devil while looking for heaven, though, Florence sets herself apart with unique additions to the sad girl canon that actually feel, on the surface at least, happy. Take Free from her latest album, Dance Fever. This grim tale of unmedicated, unruly anxiety feels more like an anthem than a cry for help.
I'm always running from something to push it back, but it keeps on coming and being clever never got me very far, because it's all in my head. You're too sensitive, they said. I said okay, but let's discuss this at the hospital.
Or even a song like Hunger from the band's 2018 release Highest Hope. Florence's register is more sultry and appropriate for the subject matter here, but rousing hooks distract from the darkness of these lyrics. which include disordered eating, drug abuse, and loneliness.
I thought that love was in the drugs, but the more I took, the more it took away, and I could never get enough.
On the flip side, while the themes are dark and melancholic, Florence isn't a wallower lyrically. Whether within the span of a verse, a track, or an entire album, her never-ending hopefulness will come around and wipe the tears away, which is a tendency that I feel must be inspired by her Christian upbringing and love of mythology and fairy tales. Even as sorrow, hunger, and anxiety front much of Florence's tracks, an undercurrent of hope, forgiveness, and regret typically arrives soon after, making those towering and euphoric vocals feel that much more deserved after where we've journeyed in any given song. These themes aren't passing whims for the lyricist either. She consistently digs in her heels and explores the darker terrain of her psyche, her dreams, and her behavior in every album the band produces. It's no wonder then that Florence often turns to fantasy and myths to help her understand her feelings, her actions, and the consequences of them. We've talked about the Christian mythology that permeates some of her most famous songs, but she also draws from other myths and fairy tales to describe how she experiences anxiety, sorrow, and even ambition. In that Viva interview, she also said that the reason I like fairy tales is that they're a way to understand things that are unexplainable and random and chaos. It's a way to understand the human condition in a way that makes sense to me. This fondness for myth and fairy tales no doubt shows up in Florence's search for forgiveness and redemption in her work. In 2018, she released a remorseful song named after her sister, Grace.
And you were the one I treated the worst, only because you loved me the most. We haven't spoken in a long time. I think about it sometimes. I don't know who I was back then, and I hope I would never treat anyone like that again.
Whether Florence is crooning about demons, anxiety, or asking her sister for forgiveness, faith seems to underpin the singer's deepest confessions and beliefs. Although divorced from the Catholicism that raised her and not wed to any sect you could check on a census form, Florence is obviously strongly guided by her faith, which seems to have been honed by intense studies of the arts and reverence for the power of music. And Florence's message around mental illness, faith, and redemption doesn't seem to be that different from how she uses Catholic messaging and iconography in her work. For Florence, hope and love are fully present and fully valid currencies with which even the darkest demons may be reformed. Florence lures us in with her dizzying world of inspiration that forms cohesive narratives through the band's music, videos, and costumes. These three core themes that Florence has interrogated since the start of her career seem disparate at first glance, but lay perfectly in place across this powerhouse musician like a papal frock. This is the second music video I've done. Check out the first one on Beyonce and Jay-Z's Mythic Love here. Please let me know if you like the style and if you have ideas for other artists who are inspired by myth and archetypes. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll subscribe, and I hope to see you in the comments.